fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus. And hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you may be. My name is Joe DeMare, and I am here with my incredible co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, and together Rebecca and I are going to craft an amazing hour of radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your families and your pets and those people over in the next town that somehow you never get around to visiting, and the fish and the whales and the birds and pretty much everybody and everything, because we are all wrapped up together in this one big, wonderful, wiggly ball called Earth. And we got a nice show for you lined up today. We're going to just chat for the next 15 minutes or so, and feel free to call in or text at any time during this next hour at 877-907-1007. Or, oh, did I say 907? I meant 909. So let's try that again.
Exactly.
877-909-1007. That's to call in. Or you can text at 419-973-5841. That's 419-973-5841. Got my text reading device all set here right in front of us. And we are going to be talking, after our little introduction here, we're going to talk a little bit about an important environmental concept that I like to go over, just basic ecological principles every now and then on the show. We're going to talk about symbiosis. And it's not what you think necessarily. So we'll chat about that for a little while. Then we'll hear from our advertisers and patrons. Then Rebecca will be talking to us about what exactly, Rebecca?
Pine tar.
Pine tar. Okay, cool. Looking forward to that. A sticky subject. Then we've got a lot of environmental news coming. We got some really big environmental stories this week, so I'm really looking forward to reporting on some of these things. But as I said, at any time during the show, during the next hour, we'd love to hear from you at 877-909-1007. Okay, well, first off, I want to announce some really good news. Those of you who listened last week with our interview with Jesse James Deer in the Water, one of the things we talked about was the Palisades nuclear power plant in Michigan was scheduled to be closed on May 31st. And Jesse was a little concerned because he was afraid Jennifer Granholm there is trying to get at some of that $6 billion that Joe Biden has set aside to keep leaky, dangerous nuclear plants running after they should close. And he was concerned that Jennifer Granholm would get that money and Palisades would stay open. But I am happy to report, in fact, I am quite joyous to report, because regular listeners to the show know that whenever a nuclear plant closes, I experience 24 hours of euphoria, because, it's a place on the planet where we have stopped making these horrible, horrible nuclear wastes that are a curse upon our descendants. And whenever we stop doing that, I'm happy. And so the announcement is that Palisades closed early. Yay! They actually, yes, thank you.
Bravo.
And, it was funny reading the reporting on that, because the reporting was all kind of like, oh, it's too bad, they closed early, blah, blah, blah. And they just toss off this mention of there was a leaky seal on one of the fuel rod injection points. And, if you're someone who's familiar with the nuclear industry, you know that leaking fuel rod seals are really bad because the water that's leaking out is core water, which is one of the most highly radioactive, one of the most deadly substances on Earth that humans have created. And so if it's cracked and it's starting to leak, and now if it breaks and the pressure inside a nuclear power plant is tremendous, like Davis Bessey, it's 40 times the atmospheric pressure, which is just an incredible amount of pressure. When you've got that situation, you've got a nuke plant that's on the edge of catastrophic failure. And nobody political seems to be able to understand this, that every minute that plant ran with a cracked, leaking seal on the fuel rod injection point, all of Michigan, Lake Michigan, and all the downstream Great Lakes were all in danger of getting contaminated. So it closed down actually on Friday. I didn't actually hear about it till yesterday, Saturday. So I get my 24 hours of joy to go from about 5 p.m. yesterday to 5 p.m. this afternoon. Then I can let the troubles of the world trouble me again. But until then, I am just, I am floating here. I'm really, really happy. So what do you think? Does that news make you happy too? At 877-909-1007. Let's see. So other stuff that's been going on in my life. One thing, I turned 60 last week, and I don't know if I mentioned this on the air last week's show, but I had a really wonderful night there Sunday night. No, I couldn't have mentioned it. Show was Sunday morning. I had this fantastic night. I was in North Carolina, and I know a lot of the people around here didn't get to see the full lunar eclipse, but where we were down there, it was just perfect. And so I was sitting out in the back of this Airbnb with my sister and my son and some friends, and we were just sitting there eating ice cream because it was like 80 degrees down there, eating ice cream and watching the lunar eclipse. So we got to see it all the way up till totality. And it was just a reminder that, the natural world will just give you these fantastic, beautiful experiences. If you just keep your eye open and just watch for them, you'll see amazing things. And there's definitely worse ways to go into your 60s than, sitting there. And that actually happened on my birthday. It was midnight, Monday morning after midnight. And so that was literally my birthday. And so it was really nice to watch that total lunar eclipse. And I'm sorry for the folks around here if you didn't get to see it. Oh, and Rebecca, you might want to turn your head when you're drinking from that thing a little bit because we're getting a little squeaky noises here. Let's see. Otherwise, gardening. It's the season. Do you have your garden in yet? We actually managed to get the garden all prepped yesterday. We rented a rototiller for a couple hours, and we've got these two big, beautiful beds of garden dirt. And I have to say, when Carol and I moved into our house in Bowling Green about 12 years ago, the soil was literally just sand. I mean, it looked kind of like a sand dune. But we, for 12 years, have been putting in compost, and we've been putting in organic stuff. Like all our leaves last year just went into the garden.
Which is because you're living on a glacial beach, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a glacial beach, and it was, and there's, in Bowling Green, you've either got sand, and that's why they have Sand Ridge Road, which is essentially a huge sand dune that stuff has grown up over, either sand or clay, or rock. So those are the three things you get. So we're on one of the sandy spots, and we've really, I'm really looking forward to the garden this year, and I got, it's all set to go, and so we're almost ready to get some stuff in the ground there. And how about you? Do you have plans for garden this year? Give us a call, 877-909-1007, or text us at 419-973-5841. What, Rebecca, how about you folks? Are you going to attempt tomatoes again this year? I know you had some problems with the local wildlife there.
We're not, because we might be moving, and therefore our garden would probably go to waste because we got on Section 8.
Okay, all right. Well, would you move? Are you going into? You're thinking of another house or apartments? Or?
It's going to be apartments, and it's going to have a common lawn, not one that's only shared by 3 people, so you can talk your landlord and letting you grow vegetables on the front lawn.
I see.
Especially if that's a part she doesn't have to mow because it's planted with vegetables.
Gotcha. All right, so you are a candidate for some of my excess tomatoes then.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay, good.
Yeah, the marinara sauce end of the season marinara sauce last year was a big hit.
Yeah. All right. Well, now it's time to move on. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to mention is that our listenership, at least as far I don't know how many people are listening right now, but thank you very much for listening. We really appreciate you. But in terms of our podcast, at least, our downloads have been going up by like a factor of of like 10 or 15. So we are really kind of taken off in the podcast area. And in fact, our show managed to get all the way up to number 35 in the Podomatic news and information ranking, subsection of their podcasts, that's 35 out of tens of thousands. So thanks so much to our podcast listeners, and keep it up. And one of the things I wanted to ask today, since we don't have a guest today, usually we have a guest in the next 15 minutes, but since we don't, we have more time for listening to you folks. And if you wanted to just give some general feedback on the show, we would really appreciate it. I guess we're doing something right because our listenership is going up. But if you wanted to just sort of let us know what you like or what you don't like or what you'd like to hear more of or less of, give us a call. Okay. Now, on to today's topic, symbiosis. And I have to start out by saying most people think the wrong thing when they think symbiosis, because, the way it's popularly used, immediately you think of the kind where 2 different things are helping each other out, the whole symbiotic relationship. And actually, symbiosis covers a lot more than that, because the actual definition of symbiosis just means direct and purposeful contact between 2 different species, 2 different plants or animals. And there's 3 types of symbiosis. One is parasitism, just that straight out parasite. And most people don't think of that as a kind of symbiosis, but to ecologists it is. Next comes commensalism, which is where things just kind of get along. There's no real advantage or disadvantage to either one, but they're there together purposefully. And then finally is the sort of mutualism, and that's what people think of. That's what people should be thinking when they think symbiosis.
Wait a minute, isn't there one where one benefits that the other is not hurt?
Yeah, that is commensalism.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, yeah. So now I'm just going to go into a quick detail about what the 3 types are here, just because, one of the reasons I started this whole show was to get people into ecology, because it's just a fascinating topic, and it's really, there's no end to the depths of ecology. And symbiosis is one of those things where every year scientists discover some new, really weird interaction and relationship between species. And, for one thing, they just recently discovered that trees actually use fungi to send messages to each other, because
crazy.
Yeah, fungi are like little threads in the ground. And so one tree, if there's a fungi connecting 2 trees, one tree can like send a little, it goes across the fungus, and the other tree gets it.
Through chemicals,
yeah,
assumes?
Mostly through chemicals,
okay.
And also electrical,
oh
biochemical.
Wow.
So yeah. So, isn't that bizarre? So that would be an example of mutualism, because the trees benefit because the fungi are putting stuff in the ground, and the trees also supply those fungi with nutrients. And so, and plus the fungi act like like telephone wires between
Something
trees.
I always liked about biology, a lot of that stuff about starfish, and it reads like science fiction, you know?
Yeah,
You
it
never
does.
dreamed such things are possible.
And it is also weird that some of the most far out ideas that people have, like, you know, the whole new age idea, oh, everything is connected. And you know, more and more the scientists say, you know what, those hippies back in the 60s, they were onto something there.
Just about everything is, in fact, connected.
Yeah, pretty much everything is connected. So, but they're in parasitism, of course, they're connected in a very unpleasant way.
Well, it's unpleasant for the other one. The other one is one of them is getting a yummy snack, and it finds it very pleasant.
Well, you know, you're right. I've never actually thought about it from the point of view of the parasite, but yeah.
You know, you can always look at it as poor bunny gets eaten by coyote, brutally murdered, or you can look at it as coyote gets yummy snack.
Okay, right. Well, parasites get lots of snacks.
Yeah, they do.
Lots of yummy snacks. So we know, of course, lots of parasites. There's tapeworms. There's fluke worms. There's lots of insects that are parasites, like mosquitoes, for example, and ticks, of course.
Yes.
And we actually have a big story about ticks coming up in the news segment. But those are all, one partner benefits and the other one is actually hurt to detriment. And ecologists sometimes describe parasites as predators who eat their prey in units of less than one.
Right.
So, and then we got commensalism, which is what you were talking about before, where one definitely benefits, but neither one really hurts each other. And a good example of this are orchids, those big, beautiful flowers, because they hang from the trees, but they do not appear to hurt the trees at all. That doesn't affect their photosynthesis. But commensalism, interestingly, can easily slip over into parasitism if conditions are right.
Right.
And one example of that, well, for the orchid example, if the orchids get too big, now they can actually get so heavy that they break the branches on the trees. Now they're harmful to the trees, so now they're considered parasites.
Oh, there's a thing about elephant birds where, like, usually they're benevolent and eat the parasites on large pachyderms or large mammal and
like
rhinoceros and
yeah.
stuff. Yeah, but then when times get hard and there isn't enough stuff, sometimes they'll just start pecking them and drinking their blood.
Right, exactly. So usually they're commensal, but in the right environmental conditions, they become parasites. And we all have an example of that on our own bodies, and those are the mites. We have skin mites that live in our eyebrows and our eyelashes, and most of the time they're harmless. And in fact, they actually help us out a little bit because they keep cleaning up your little flaking skins around your eyes and things. And so, but they can, if people have a weak immune system or in the wrong conditions, they can overpopulate, and then they can actually cause like dermatitis and rashes and things like that.
Just going to tie in more about that later when we get to the pine tar thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that. I gave you a lead in.
I did.
It just happened. Wow. So I guess that would be mutualism there, which is our next thing, where both members in the partnership, the symbiosis, benefit. And those are the fun ones for me. That's really fascinating because those tend to happen as ecosystems get more complex. As you get more and more species, all of a sudden things from way across the tree of life from each other go, oh, hey, I could connect up with you and we could do some cool stuff together. So mutualism is the most fun sort of symbiosis. And there's lots of examples. There's two types of mutualism. One is obligate and the other is facultative. And the obligates, they have to be together in order to survive. And one of the most, one that's been in the news a lot in the past few years is the coral and algae connection, because the coral really need to have algae in their little coral spaces with them to produce enough food for them to survive. And when they eject the algae, that's the chloral bleaching. Once they do that, then their days are numbered, because they don't get enough nutrients.
I'm hungry.
Yeah, it can be hungry too.
Not for algae.
But humans also have an obligate obligate symbiotic critter. We've got bacteria in our guts that produce the vitamin K that we need to have blood clotting. So if we lost all our bacteria in our gut, we would all become hemophiliacs eventually. If we couldn't get enough vitamin K in our diets.
Also, there's some other unpleasant things that happen when you're, as my dad used to say when he took antibiotics, they killed off my fauna.
Yep. Don't want your fauna killed off. And oftentimes creatures will sort of evolve into the obligate mutualism, even if they don't start out that way.
Right.
Because leafcutter ants, for example, have evolved to the point where their larvae can only eat the fungus that leafcutter ants, what they function is they cut bits of leaf, bring them down into their homes, and they raise fungus down there on those bits of leaf. And now the leafcutter ant larvae can only eat that fungus. So without the fungus, leafcutter ants would go extinct. Yeah. Last, and then of course there is the facultative, which are where critters help each other, but they don't depend on each other for survival. That would be things like, for example, the wrasse or the cleaning fish at a coral reef. Like if those fish are there, they help reduce parasites, but everybody could live, there would still be fish around without those cleaning fish, but it just makes life more pleasant for everybody.
No doubt, yes.
So that's one kind of symbiosis, those cleaning fish with a mutualism, with a facultative mutualism, getting rid of parasites, which have another kind of symbiosis. So the symbioses are interacting in an interesting way. So, all right, that was our little discussion of mutualism and commensalism and parasitism, or as they're all called together, symbiosis. All right, now on to our advertisers and patrons. Yay! 4 Green Futures brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead people on outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And there's several ways to find out what's going on over at the Wood County Parks. One is to give them a call at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. You can also go to their website, wcparks.org, and they have a Nifty app from the Nifty App Store. Go to any such store and search for WC Parks, and you put that on your phone, and you can see, upcoming announcements and see some nice pictures people have taken at the parks. And, of course, they're on all the social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the Wood County Park District. And 4 Green Futures also brought to you by our patrons. And our patrons are incredibly wonderful, sympathetic people, the kind of people you really like to just hang out with. They're really nice people as far as I know, the ones that I know. But they have the foresight to understand that if you want to keep good information coming, you have to sacrifice a little bit to keep that information coming, especially in these days when information has become so parcelized and so packaged. It's essential to get that little bit of information that you can count on that isn't part of the mainstream media. And so that's what we do, and we couldn't do it without the help of our patrons. Thank you very much. And if you are interested, they went to patreon.com, that's Patreon, and they searched for 4 Green Future, and that's how they signed up, patreon.com. Okay, now on to the interesting episode on pine tar. Let's go ahead.
Well, of course, I want to do something about North Carolina, to tie in with where Joe's been this week. And, of course, when you look up North Carolina, the first thing that comes up is the Tar Heels, and it makes you wonder stuff like, why are all these people stepping in tar in North Carolina? Like, who's spilling all this tar? Why is it only on their heels and not the rest of their shoes?
Yeah, all excellent questions.
I still don't know that last one. Apparently, that's because North Carolina was, and maybe still is, a major producer of pine tar, which is a natural wood preservative. You know, they got pine forest there in North Carolina. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it's made by slowly burning resin from rootstock of pine trees, although you can also make birch tar, apparently. And first you have to tap the trees, and then there's this burning process. And they're very popular because they help the wood resist microbes, like fungi, molds, germs, etc., blah, blah, blah. Bacteria. It was first used in Mesopotamia 7,000 years ago. Popular over the centuries. And I think, was it Sweden used to be a big producer of pine tar also. For a while it was Sweden, and then it became North Carolina. It was the center of production. But they're popular for use in boats, ships, ropes, buildings, fences, leather, baseball bats, fishing gear, gun stocks, cart axles, and animals' hooves. Usually, if you're putting it on your house to keep it from the bacteria from the wood rotting, essentially, usually it's mixed with linseed oil, turpentine, or formaldehyde. So also they use it a lot on organic farms for gardening boxes because it's a natural substance. It doesn't have any harmful effects to speak of, that are known. Also used for medicinal purposes. Do not use the kind you get at the hardware store that's mixed for formaldehyde and turpentine with this. But you can get medicinal pine tar products. It's an anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, antifungal, and antipruritic, which mean on your skin, which means it makes you not itch. It's used for eczema, psoriasis, seborrheic dermatitis, etc. It's been used for medicine for at least 2,000 years, whereas coal tar, what I think of as tar, is only 100 years old. We only started using that 100 years ago.
Coal tar.
Yeah. And it works apparently by reducing DNA synthesis and mitotic activity. So it's a cell division, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, yeah, there are a couple problems. You want to be careful. The modern distilling process, though, is pretty good at getting out phenol and carcinogenic compounds. They can be refined out. So not a huge worry, if you're trying to make it yourself, which is not a good idea anyway, probably. Phenol would apparently be a organic compound which is toxic in its pure form. It's found a lot in spray cleaners and mouthwash. It has sort of an antiseptic, hospital-y smell. And but still, kind of smells nice and natural too. That's why it's in cleaners a lot. Like, one thinks of pine sol, smells like pine. Everybody likes that. Some people also use it. I'm not sure whether this has been proven, but it's used for washing fabric in pine tar soap may prevent bugs from eating fabric or biting the person wearing the clothes. And some people feel like it makes wool feel softer. Incidentally, it's illegal in baseball to have it above 18 inches above the knob on a baseball bat, because that will create, if it hits it, the ball hits it, it'll create extra spin, and you'll either get a foul or a home run. It creates a lot of fouls and home runs.
I did not know that.
And there was apparently a big scandal about this in 1983. People were putting too much pine tar in their bats, and then it was decided people can't do that. It's also used to make hair soft, soothe the scalp. It's used on the bottom of skis. And you can put it on pecked hens, apply it to the wounds, and the other hens will be discouraged from pecking them because they don't like the smell or something.
Oh, pecked hens.
Yeah.
So chickens that are getting bullied.
Yeah, basically, it's an anti-bullying technique. Yeah, when I first... I thought it had something to do with mummies, because I remember that, but what it actually is that Egyptian mummies were made by applying resin. I don't know if it was pine or birch resin. Not a lot of trees in Egypt. I don't know. They must have been getting this from foreigners. Maybe that's why they were trading with people.
There were a lot more trees back then than there are now.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. But the word mummy, apparently, it's a Greek word that ended up in Greek from the Persian word mum, which means wax. And then it became an Arab word meaning sticky stuff. And then it became the word for the dead body you put sticky stuff on. So it's sort of kind of loosely connected anyway.
Interesting. All right. Well, pine tar.
Yeah.
Who would have thought? So it sounds like very superior to, what we do now with the pressure-treated lumber, where we stick all kinds of nasty toxic chemicals in there.
And not anywhere near as bad for you, apparently.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you. And so now we know why they're the Tar Heels. Yeah.
I like to know how things work,
Yeah.
and have worked.
Important question answered. All right. So now on to ecological news. And we got a bunch of stories here to get through. So the first one ties back in with my talk about symbiosis. This is a case of parasitism, but this parasitism actually kind of crosses the line into predation, really, because there's a story on May 18th, Maine Public Radio did a story. Turns out that moose in Maine, ticks killed now
I saw that.
nearly 90% of the moose calves.
Very sad.
Tracked by scientists.
Or babies.
Yeah, in the last 2 years. And so what's happening is this is a direct result of climate change. All the scientists are right up front about this because it turns out that spring is coming a full 3 weeks earlier in Maine than it used to, like 10 years back. And what this allows is for the ticks to mature earlier. And what these particular ticks do, they have a terrible, well, from our point of view, terrible, but of course from the tick point of view, very clever technique.
Okay, ticks, but if you kill off all the moose, then your food source is gone.
Yeah, I know. Every predator has to learn that.
I just want to point it out to any ticks that might be listening.
So what the ticks do is they, like other ticks, they climb up on plants and wait for an animal to pass by, and then they latch onto them. But what these ticks do is, each female tick can lay up to 3,000 eggs, and the ticks, they all kind of hatch at the same time, and they all climb up the plants together. And once up there, they all link their back legs to each other, and so they actually form a net.
Like this little insect acrobatic team from hell.
Yeah.
Great.
Yes, that is a perfect description. And so a moose going by can get literally hundreds of ticks at
Flying
once.
Melindas, wonderful.
Right. And so it's gotten so bad there in some of the areas in Maine that they find that typically the moose have 50 to 90,000 ticks on them. And it's
okay, why global warming?
What?
Global warming?
Global warming, right?
Yeah.
Because because this is becoming more and more effective because spring is coming so much earlier.
Oh yeah.
And what used to happen is that
used to freeze over the winter, probably.
not just the winter, but in the spring when they had late freezing rains
So
or
the
late
calves
hard
could
frosts.
they could get off to a good start, and then the ticks would attack them at least.
Yeah, and lots of the ticks got killed. While if they're poised up there on their plants, waiting for a moose to come by, and they get hit by a freezing rain, that kills them. But now there is no more freezing rain. There are no more hard frosts in the spring, and so all those ticks are having a great time. But the moose are dying in large numbers in Maine.
That's not good.
No, and in fact, almost all the moose in some areas have anemia, and they're literally starving. That their reproduction is failing. Like we said, 90% of the calves die, and it's all global warming related. So those the people that.
And try saying to a moose, "Excuse me, we just need to put some tick killer on your baby."
Yeah, no, people have been trying to come up with. It's
going to just basically trample you into pink-tinged petroleum jelly if you try that.
Yeah, no, moose are not something you want to mess with. And people have been trying to come up with, quote unquote solutions, like you say, trying to either treat some of the moose or spray pesticides to kill the ticks, but.
There's a good stopgap, but you know what we need to do ultimately.
Right. Stop putting carbon in the air and bring back winter. And
would be good on so many levels.
Pretty much all the ecologists watching this process happen, are saying all these stopgap solutions are actually worse than the, it would actually hurt more than it would help the moose.
Yeah, because it's pesticides. They don't need that,
Right. I was reading this, and I did think of that there could be an interesting commensal relationship because one of the biggest consumers of ticks in the wild are possums.
Oh, yeah.
And so in some places, possums have been observed grooming other animals and eating the ticks off of them. And so,
So if you're a possum, you can come up to a moose and be like, "Excuse me, I'm gonna just get some ticks off your baby."
well, maybe I don't know I don't know how the moose will handle that, but maybe if they hook up, maybe moose and possum could help each other out.
That'd be nice.
Deer also are subject to this, but the deer have much more sensitive skin, and so they actually feel the ticks on themselves
Ew.
and groom themselves before they all latch on. But the moose can't actually feel the ticks until they've latched on, and then it's too late. So
because mooses are kind of a flesh tank.
yeah. So we'll see what happens up there, but it's not looking good for the moose in Maine. Now, off across the ocean, off to England, where we have construction going on of a nuclear power plant called Hinkley C. And surprise, surprise, they came out with a statement this past week. They're going to be even later and even further over budget. The original budget, when it was approved in 2016, was supposed to be 16 billion pounds was supposed to be the cost of this plant. And in the latest incremental increase, they're up to 26 billion pounds.
But why is it named after an actual psychopath?
Good
Is
question.
that a coincidence?
I think it is. Yeah, I think Hinkley, it's a British name. There are lots of non-psychopathic Hinkleys.
Yeah, I'm sure there are.
In the world.
There's even some non-psychopathic Woods. It's great.
Yeah, So, so 26 billion pounds, that's about $32 billion. And, substantial increase. And Hinkley C is the same plan as other reactors that are being built in like Finland and things that have reached more than triple their originally estimated cost. So Hinkley C's got a ways to go yet before they're finished increasing their cost to people. It started construction in 2018. It was supposed to be done by 2025, but at the same time they announced that they're increasing the cost. They pushed the start back to 2027. So now 2 years behind schedule and roughly $10 billion over budget and counting. And the ironic thing about this, of course, is that Britain, the prime minister there, Boris Johnson, is trying to push even more nuclear power development, and that is not going over well with people. They just had a tremendous protest against Hinkley C, and in fact, it was one of the biggest protests in Britain in a long time. So the people don't want it, and as we said before, they're pushing back against it. And
it's more of a Hinkley C here.
Right. Yes.
We don't want this sort of thing. That was a terrible, terrible accent.
Oh, not too bad. But speaking of accents, here I'm putting on my Australian accent.
Uh-oh.
For the next news story. Australia just had elections, and Scott Morrison got kicked out. Scott Morrison, we've reported on him before.
Bye-bye, Scott.
Yeah, the prime minister. And the reason was climate change. That was literally the biggest issue in this last election for Australia.
People get annoyed when everybody's house burns down.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Australia's been hit with way more heat waves and wildfires than a lot of places. When we had Helen Caldicott on a few years ago, a year before last, she was describing having to flee her house, from the flames, and the people took it to heart and were like, you've got to do something. But Scott Morrison was all like, oh, hey, let's increase our coal exports because
he did something. Exactly, it just wasn't something good.
Yeah, it was the wrong thing.
Right.
There were some other issues too about corruption and integrity, and he had a really. I have to report on this one. Actually, this was also reported on Stephen Colbert, but he did a photo op with a bunch of grade schoolers playing soccer. And just a word to politicians, before you do something like that, make sure you're in good enough shape to stay on your feet. Because what happened is all the cameras rolling and these kids are kicking the soccer ball around and he goes for the ball and trips on his own feet and comes down right on top of one of the little kids. He's like an 8-year-old, and this big guy is like thump right on
I
top
know
of him.
that no publicity is all publicity is good publicity or whatever, but maybe not that.
Yeah.
Don't squash grade school children.
And so the joke immediately became that Australians were starting to name their children climate change to protect them from getting tackled by the prime minister.
Okay.
So the new prime minister is a fellow by the name of Anthony Albanese, and he's from the Labour Party, and he's going to get sworn in on Monday, tomorrow. But then immediately, I'm a little worried about this. Immediately, he's going to whisk off to Japan for what's called a Quad summit, and he's going to meet with the prime ministers of Japan and India and with Joe Biden. And what worries me about this is Australia is the only really large industrialized country which has never, ever had a nuke plant, giving a complete lie to all these people that have said, oh, you've got to have nuke plants for a modern economy. No, Australia has never had a nuke plant. But Anthony Albanese is going to go meet with the nuclear zombies that run Japan and India and Joe Biden. And I'm afraid
Japan hasn't had any major problems with nuclear plants, so they're a great role model. Yeah, that's what you want.
Yeah, so I'm afraid that he's going to go there and they're going to gang up on him and say, "Look, you got to get some nuke plants, man. If you want to be, a real big country like us.
All the cool kids are doing it.
All the cool countries have nukes
because we say we're cool. So
right. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen when he goes there, because that would be terrible if he came back from that and announced Australia is going to get into nukes. That would be nasty. But for right now, the results of this election are really, really wonderful, because as it should be in every election, the prime issue was climate change. And there were also huge gains by the Green Party of Australia. They've won more seats than they've ever won before. They got 12.3% of the overall vote, which is going to make them the biggest there's two main parties, like there seem to be everywhere, and then the Greens are the next biggest party in Australia. So congratulations to everybody in Australia on such a wonderful decision, and voting for the future. That's great. Unfortunately, we immediately, because this is politics, have to temper that with what's going on up there in Canada, in Ontario. And they are having elections on June 2nd. And it looks like Jack Ford, the Premier of Ontario, who is the Progressive Conservative Party candidate, which we've talked about him before because he canceled billions of dollars worth of wind turbine contracts at a cost of to the taxpayers in Ontario of over $32 billion. But it looks like going into this election, he's in the lead in the polls. It looks like Canada might not be able to put two and two together the way the Australian voters did. Now, he promised to reduce electric bills by 12% by canceling all these wind turbine things. Unfortunately, he lied. Instead, electric costs have gone up by 4% instead of down by 12%. And what he's done is he's sending checks to everybody who pays electric bills in Ontario, but those checks are directly coming out of the Treasury. And so what you're doing is you're just taking tax money and
giving it back.
So people,
with one hand and
right? So people can pay their electric bills, and so, but the electric bills have still gone up. So now the taxes have gone up to pay for the rebates on the electric, which has gone up. And all the studies say that with his policies, the electric bills are going to increase an average of 2.4% for the next 10 years. But somehow he's ahead in the polls, and part of the reason it appears is that Trudeau loves him. Trudeau, even though he's from a different party, has been kind of dissing his party's candidate for Premier of Ontario and appearing on stage with Ford and giving him grants and announcing funding. And another part of the reason seems to be his positions on COVID, because Ford started out as your typical Trumpian, right wing. It's all imaginary. Go out without your mask and kiss people with COVID. French kissing, personally, because it is, Canada, and you need to do both French and English on everything.
Exactly, right.
But then as people kept getting sick.
How do English people kiss, Joe? Is it good? I don't know.
They
It's
don't.
English people.
They just don't.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm worried.
No, there is no English kiss that I know of.
Yeah.
But
I'm afraid it's going to end up like they're cooking or something.
right. But as people kept getting sick and as the statistics kept coming in, he totally reversed himself and said, oh, no, we've got to vaccinate. Everybody should wear their mask, blah, blah, blah. And so apparently the fact that he can be taught was enough for a lot of Canadians to say, oh, well, maybe he's kind of reasonable. But nature weighed in on this past week, actually yesterday, because what Mother Nature said is, oh, Ford's in the lead. So it hit Ontario with a tremendous storm.
Good for her. Good for her.
Yeah, which you may not have heard about, but this storm was big enough that, this should have made some news here in the States. At least 4 people dead, close to 100 people injured, 82-mile-an-hour winds, almost 1 million people without power. It hit both Ontario and Quebec. And there was a tornado in Gaylord, Quebec, which is like.
I remember seeing that on the news.
Oh, you did see that on the news? Okay, but yeah, I think Mother Nature kind of stepped in there and said, "Oh, you don't think climate's a big issue in this
Giant
election?
deadly storms for Ford."
Yeah,
He had an endorsement.
That's true. I hadn't thought of looking at it from that perspective. Yeah, from the tornado's candidate, the chosen candidate would be Jack Ford. So, so that's what's going on up in Canada. But I'm not letting it get me down because we still closed Palisades. So
good.
I'm still happy. Next, going on to as we say in our show every morning, this is about your wealth, health, and happiness. A direct health thing, a Guardian story on May 19th. Environmental toxins are worsening obesity pandemic, say scientists. So, now you have something to blame besides the Big Macs that you're eating. It turns out that a lot of chemicals, over 50 chemicals, have been proven to be what are called obesogens, which actually, if you take them into your body, they actually cause you to become obese. And there are a lot of chemicals. We've heard the names of a lot of these before. Like I say, there's over 50. I'm not going to list them all, but there's bisphenol A, BPA. There's phthalates. There's DDT is actually still in the environment and causing problems like that. Tributylin, dioxins, of course, PCBs. And what they do is they act like hormones in your body. And they cause you to have more and bigger fat cells. So as if your fat cells weren't enough of a problem just on their usual size.
They don't need any help. They're doing fine.
Yeah, now.
Stay out of it, tributylin.
Yeah, but now it's even bigger. And so it's difficult to avoid this kind of thing in our society because these chemicals have become so prevalent. But the scientists who authored the study say that, you can help yourself by eating organic as much as possible because there's a lot fewer of these in organic foods, and also avoiding plastic as much as possible because a lot of these things are in plastics. And one thing I remember that's kind of stuck with me is that phthalates were often used to make plastic like softer and more malleable, and so pacifiers used to be made with phthalates, which turns out the effects of these chemicals can actually be multi-generational. So they've discovered, for example, the grandchildren of women who were exposed to high levels of DDT back in the 50s and 60s, they're more likely to be obese than people who weren't. And there's about 2 billion, of the 7 billion of us, about 2 billion of us are obese right now. So it's not all diet and exercise. There is definitely an environmental issue there. So we need to reduce the amount of all these chemicals, and for other reasons too, we need to get rid of plastics. But this is just yet another reason to do what we should be doing. All right, and so we're going to end on some upbeat news, and because I'm still, like I say, walking on sunshine here. The think tank Ember, which is based in Europe, had released a story that was covered by Euronews.com, and Euronews has a little section on green stuff, euronews.com/green, and they say solar and wind power can limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade, new report reveals. That's the big long headline. But the basic thing is that this think tank, they've been looking at the rate at which we've been putting in wind and solar.
Oh, so in fact, you can limit it to much less than that if we would do more of it.
Right.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah. But we are on track right now. If the 10-year average compound growth rate of 20% is maintained, then we will be able to meet the Paris Accord limits of 1.5% new 1.5% centigrade temperature increase.
Are those limits actually adequate to save life on Earth, or?
Well, that is the number.
Not know quite?
Well, yeah, no, that's the number that scientists have said.
Okay.
This is the limit.
Yeah.
Above 1.5% centigrade, society is basically doomed because we won't be able to raise crops, or the heat waves and the cold snaps are going to get so severe we won't be able to keep ourselves hot or cold, warm, as opposed to hot or cold, and people,
which is the whole point of being a mammal,
right? So this 1.5, that's the limit, and so we can, according to this think tank, we are not just we are actually on track to make that, because so many gas plants and coal plants and nuke plants are getting shut down, and worldwide they're being replaced by wind and solar.
So they're going to fight like a dying snake, I'm guessing.
Oh, they are, yeah, and and in places like Ohio, of course, that's not happening because the current energy companies have complete control of our state government. And in fact, that's what one of the points this think tank is making, is that even though we're on track to do this, governments are being essentially taken over by nuclear and fossil fuel industries and are being used to thwart it. And, so it's a race to see if we can keep this pace up, or if the evil people are going to manage to derail it.
So, yeah, democracy and survival of the planet kind of linked.
Yeah, definitely. And going back to Australia is one of the countries where they have increased the amount of wind and solar the most. They increased it by 10% in just 2 years. And so, we've talked about Australia before, how they've got 40% rooftop solar, and they eliminated the whole peak demand problem, even though they have incredibly high temperatures. And they did that without the active interference of the government there, even though, what's his name, the guy who just got kicked out there, Scott Morrison, even though his policies didn't help wind or solar, it was all done with private or regional or local government investment. He didn't help, but he also didn't hurt. That is the big difference between him and places like Ohio, where, as we know, regulations are actively hurting the rollout of solar power. So a couple other countries that increased by 10% in just 2 years: Netherlands, not too surprising, and Vietnam, interestingly, increased their wind and solar by 10% in just 2 years. And so, that is very hopeful. And once again, it proves that there's no technical reason that we cannot beat this global warming thing.
So it was Ralph Waldo Emerson said something about or Thoreau maybe said we have all the tools to make Earth a paradise if we just get off our butts and do it. Those are not his exact words. It was something slightly. He phrased it slightly differently.
Yeah, but that is essentially true, and that's what this think tank Ember has confirmed.
We got the tools and the materials too.
Yeah, and
the know-how.
And we're actually doing it. All we have to do is prevent the politicians from derailing it.
Okay.
Well, thanks very much for listening, folks. If you have any comments, send them to joe@joedemar4agreenfuture.org. Thanks so much to our podcast listeners who've been burgeoning. We love that. And this is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off.
with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that